It was 8:14 in the morning when the kettle began to hiss. I liked that sound, a small, obedient thing that never forgot its purpose. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon soap and toast warming in the oven. I stood by the sink, drying a single chipped teacup, the one with a faded blue rim. I had meant to replace it, but it felt wrong somehow. Some things, even when cracked, still carried the memory of steady mornings. The table was set for 4, me, Liam, and my parents. 2 plates, 2 cups, and the small bowl of sugar my mother always insisted on, though she never touched it. I glanced at the clock, saw the second hand sweep over 8:15, and wiped my hands on a towel. They were supposed to arrive by 8:30. They liked punctuality when it was their plan, not mine. Liam's footsteps padded down the hallway. He was 12 now, all elbows and sketches. "Should I set out the jam, Mom?" he asked, holding the jar like it was something sacred. "Please," I said. "They'll be here soon." He nodded, opening the lid carefully, his concentration making me smile. Sundays were supposed to be our easy days, breakfast, a drive, and then his art show at the community center. I'd spent half the night ironing his shirt and polishing the shoes he barely fit into anymore. I wanted my parents to see him, to see us. Something simple, unremarkable, but still a family. At 8:45, the phone began to ring. I felt the familiar prickle behind my ribs. They were always late, but they rarely called. I picked up. "Morning, Mom," I said, keeping my tone light. Her voice came through, thin but sharp. "Morning, dear. Your father isn't feeling well today. We're just going to stay home and rest." I pressed the edge of the counter with my free hand. "Is he all right?" "Oh, he's fine. Just a bit tired. You know how it is when you get older." A small pause. "You two have fun without us." I waited for her to say something else, an apology, a promise, even a half-hearted excuse. Instead, I heard the faint clatter of dishes in the background, then the click of the line ending. Liam was watching me. "They're not coming?" I shook my head. "Not today. Grandpa's a little tired." He didn't argue, but his shoulders lowered just enough for me to see the truth. "We can still go," he said. "You'll come to the show, right?" "Of course I will." He nodded again, pretending to be fine, but I could see the disappointment settle into his quiet. Children didn't always cry when they were hurt. Sometimes they just stopped expecting. I poured the hot water into the chipped teacup, the steam curling upward. The sound filled the space where their laughter should have been. I carried it to the table, sat down, and tried to eat. The toast cooled quickly. From the window, I could see the small bird feeder my father had installed last spring. He'd promised to visit often to refill it. The seeds had clumped with dust now, untouched. A pair of sparrows pecked at the empty tray before fluttering away. I set the teacup down a little harder than I meant to. The small crack along its rim caught the light, a faint thread of white against blue. It wasn't the first time they'd canceled. Last month it had been Liam's piano recital. They'd forgotten the date. Before that, the anniversary of David's passing, my husband. They'd sent flowers, late and perfumed too sweetly, with a note written by someone else's hand. "Your parents love you," my sister used to say, before she moved 2 states away. They just show it differently. But after a while, you start to understand that differently is just another word for less. By 9:15, the kitchen had gone still. I gathered the plates and set them back in the cupboard. Liam slipped his sketchbook into his backpack and waited by the door. "Can we go early?" he asked. "Sure," I said. "We'll stop for cocoa on the way." He smiled, a small, forgiving thing, and I followed him out. The sun had climbed higher, spilling light through the window and across the chipped cup still sitting in the sink. I hesitated, looking at it one last time before we left. Some part of me thought about throwing it away, starting over. But instead, I rinsed it gently, set it upside down on the rack, and whispered, almost without meaning to, "Maybe next Sunday." The kettle clicked off behind me, its steam fading into the quiet. It was 9:42 in the evening when I finally sat down at the small desk in my home office. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Liam had gone to bed an hour earlier, his sketchbook resting open on the nightstand. I told myself I'd only check the bills for a minute, but I already knew where the night would end, with another transfer. The glow of the laptop screen filled the room with its pale light. My fingers hesitated over the trackpad before opening the banking app. I had memorized the rhythm by now. Click, sign in, confirm, send. The same motion I'd done every few weeks for nearly 2 years. I typed carefully. Zelle transfer to Margaret and Thomas Hale, $1,000. October 12th, 2025. The number sat on the screen like a bruise. I took a breath and pressed send. The little notification popped up. Transfer successful. There it was again. Duty, disguised as affection. I leaned back in the chair, rubbing the bridge of my nose. The room smelled faintly of printer ink and lemon disinfectant from the afternoon cleaning. On the corner of the desk sat a blue folder with a thin label written in my own handwriting. Family expenses. It was heavier now, stuffed with printed receipts and scribbled notes. Every page carried the same message. How much, how often, and for whom. 2 years ago, it had started as a kindness. My mother had needed minor surgery. Something routine, she'd said, and I'd offered to cover her recovery costs. Just until you're back on your feet, I'd told her. I was working steady shifts at the hospital then, overtime pay coming in regularly. My father's voice had been warm when he called that night. You've always been better with money, Evie. We trust you to handle it. I remember smiling, proud and foolish. Trust sounded like love, and I wanted to believe it was. After that, it became automatic. First the hospital bills, then the utilities, then their groceries. Each time they'd promised to send something back, but they never did. We'll settle it next month, my father would say. You know how pension timing is. At first I didn't mind. They were my parents. They'd worked hard their whole lives. But the pattern never stopped. It simply shifted form. The car repairs. The new water heater. A dental crown. A leaky roof. Now it was October again, and the totals in my own account had begun to thin. I reached for the folder and flipped it open. Inside, the neat rows of paper looked almost proud of their orderliness. I had written everything by hand, the dates, the notes, the categories. It helped me feel in control, though lately it only reminded me how much I had lost. January through December of the year 2023. 12 transfers, each for $1,000. April 2024, $500 for their car insurance. June 2024, $800 for plumbing. September 2024, $2,000 for their unexpected property tax. The ink on that last one had bled a little, where a teardrop or perhaps a splash of tea had smudged it. My own bills sat unopened on the lower shelf. Electricity, mortgage, Liam's school supplies. The envelope with his art club fees lay underneath, still sealed. I had told him I'd pay it this week. The numbers whispered at me, small but persistent. Sometimes when I'd call my parents to check in, I'd hear laughter in the background, guests over, music playing. Once, my mother had mentioned a new dining set, another time a weekend trip to the coast. I'd smiled through it, though my chest felt tight. When I hinted gently about the transfers, my father's tone always turned firm. We're family, Evelyn. We all help each other. You're doing well. A nurse with a good salary. You don't want us to struggle, do you? And that word, struggle, carried weight. Because in our family, struggle was a moral failure, and I had been raised never to let anyone, least of all my parents, fail. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. I checked the balance again. The new total looked smaller than I expected. I reached for my notebook, another habit, and began listing the upcoming payments. Mortgage, due October 20th. Gas bill, unpaid since September. Liam's art trip fee, $60. I paused over that last line. $60. Not much in the grand scheme of things, and yet it had waited 3 weeks for me to act. The air felt heavy in the room. I looked at the folder again, at the way it bulged, thick with proof of my obedience. I ran my fingers over the cover. tracing the word family until the ink left a faint smudge on my skin. My eyes drifted toward the window. Outside, the street lamp flickered against the autumn wind. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then quieted. I thought of my mother's voice earlier that morning. Calm, dismissive. You two have fun without us. I wondered if they had eaten breakfast together anyway. The kettle in the kitchen clicked faintly, the leftover heat still humming from dinner. I closed the laptop, stacked the papers neatly, and slid the blue folder back into the drawer. Before shutting it, I whispered something to the silence. Just until next month. But the words didn't sound like comfort anymore. They sounded like a contract I hadn't agreed to sign. The clock on the wall ticked over to 10:21. I turned off the lamp, the room sinking into a soft gray darkness. In the quiet, I could almost hear the rustle of paper, that blue folder breathing beneath the desk, growing heavier with every promise I'd made. The sun was sliding down, turning the neighborhood gold. Evelyn parked outside the old brick house and sat for a moment before cutting the engine. The grocery bags in the passenger seat looked heavier than they were. A week's worth of vegetables, cereal, the herbal tea her mother liked but always forgot to buy. She smoothed her uniform pants, tucking her ID badge into her pocket. Just dinner, she whispered to herself. Drop the food off, talk for an hour, and leave. Inside, the house smelled the same, lavender air freshener over old carpet. Margaret's voice came from the kitchen before Evelyn could take off her shoes. You bought the small eggs again? You know they shrink in the pan, Evelyn smiled thinly. They were on sale, Mom. Same brand. Margaret sighed, a long theatrical sound. I don't know why you insist on being cheap with groceries. You don't have children to feed. Evelyn set the bags on the counter one by one. I'm saving for Liam's art show, she said quietly. He's been painting after work. I promised I'd help him with the exhibit fee. Her mother gave a half smile, the kind that looked polite from a distance but collapsed under light. Still wasting his time on that? Well, at least you've got a real job. Evelyn turned to the sink to hide her face. She rinsed her hands, the water running warm over her wrists. He loves it, she said. That's enough. From the dining room came the faint rustle of papers. Harold sat at the table with his reading glasses low on his nose, flipping through a pile of envelopes. The utility bill's gone up again, he said without looking up. I'll transfer what's needed tonight, Evelyn replied automatically. Margaret opened the refrigerator and began rearranging the contents Evelyn had just brought. Your brother called, she said. He says the bank offered him another promotion. Maybe you could learn something from him about saving money. I am saving, Evelyn said. Margaret's laugh was small and sharp. Oh, sweetheart, you've always been emotional about money. That's why we let you handle ours, so you don't waste it. Evelyn froze. Let me handle it? Her mother turned, closing the fridge door with her hip. Of course. We could do it ourselves, but we trust you. You're better with numbers. Evelyn smiled faintly, though her stomach felt tight. Right, she said, remembering her father's words from years ago. You're better with money. We trust you. It had sounded like love back then. Now it felt like a script, one they used to keep her in place. Dinner was quiet except for the clinking of cutlery. Harold had turned on the evening news, half listening, half signing papers from a blue folder Evelyn didn't recognize. What's that? She asked. Just routine banking? He said, his voice flat. Don't worry about it. Her eyes caught a signature line. Her own name, written neatly in his handwriting. Dad, that's my name. Yes, he said too quickly. It's easier to manage the transfers this way. You've been busy. Evelyn set down her fork. You signed a check under my name? It's just for the mortgage, Margaret said. You'd only fuss if we asked first. You always do. Her throat tightened. You mean if I said no? Silence fell. Harold folded the paper, careful not to meet her eyes. Margaret sipped her water, her lipstick leaving a faint coral mark on the rim. Evelyn looked at them, her parents, sitting comfortably in the house she'd been quietly funding for 2 years. She thought of her own place, the cracked tile by the sink, the leaky faucet she hadn't had time to fix. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "You didn't even tell me. We raised you," Margaret said softly, as if explaining to a child. "You wouldn't even have that nursing job if it weren't for us. We just thought it was fair." Fair. The word landed like a slap, gentle but humiliating. Later, as Evelyn packed the empty grocery bags, she heard laughter through the open window. Her parents were outside talking to their neighbors, the Greenfields, who always waved when Evelyn visited. "She's such a good girl," Margaret was saying. "We've been helping her out since she started at the hospital. You know how hard it is for young people these days." Evelyn stopped in the doorway, her heart sinking, helping her out. Harold chuckled. "We cover most of her bills. She tries, though." Evelyn stepped back, pressing her palm against the doorframe. The wood was cool under her fingers. They weren't just using her money. They were rewriting the story. Her generosity, her late-night budgeting, her quiet sacrifices, had become a rumor of their kindness. A public performance of parental virtue. She walked to the car in silence, the grocery bags rustling in her hands, though they were empty now. Her reflection caught in the car window. Tired eyes, soft face, a streak of gray at her temple she hadn't noticed before. She sat behind the wheel and stared at the small mountain of receipts in her purse. Grocery totals, utility payments, mechanic fees, tiny proof of years she'd given without question. She pulled one out at random, 212-076, car repair, Harold's name. She traced the ink with her thumb until it smudged. "They've rewritten it." The thought came again and again, as steady as a heartbeat. At the next red light, she took a breath and said it aloud. "They've rewritten it." And with that, something quiet but irreversible began to shift, the first thin crack in the habit of obedience. The bank smelled faintly of polished wood and citrus cleaner, the same as it had for years. Evelyn stood in line clutching her worn blue folder, the one labeled Family Expenses. Her name and her parents' accounts were neatly listed on the front, each transfer highlighted in different colors. She'd updated it last night, after another quiet argument in her head. The waiting area was filled with soft chatter and the hum of a printer. A television above the counter played muted financial news. Evelyn shifted her weight from one foot to the other, the soles of her nursing shoes sticking slightly to the polished floor. "Next, please." The teller gestured her forward. Evelyn smiled politely. "Hi, I need to speak with Mr. Avery. Thomas Avery?" "He's the branch manager." The teller checked a schedule. "Of course. Do you have an appointment?" "No," Evelyn admitted. "But he knows me. I handle transfers for the Clark accounts." The teller nodded. "Just a moment, Ms. Clark." Thomas Avery appeared a few minutes later, his sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on his nose. He had the calm, deliberate air of someone used to listening more than talking. "Evelyn," he said warmly, offering his hand. "It's been a while. Come on back." She followed him through the glass doors into his small office. Everything inside was symmetrical. 2 chairs, a computer, a small vase of tulips near the window. The light made the glass walls glow, faintly reflective. "So," he said, settling into his chair. "What brings you in today?" Evelyn opened her folder and placed it between them. "There was a transfer issue last week. I sent money to my parents' account, same as always, but it bounced back. I just wanted to make sure their information's still active." He typed a few keys. "Let's see." His eyes moved between screens, brow furrowed. "Ah, yes. The account's fine. Looks like the transfer failed because the joint authorization flag was removed." She blinked. "The what?" "It means someone adjusted the permissions. You used to have joint control of the account, access to send or receive. But now it's restricted to your parents' signatures." Evelyn frowned. "They said nothing changed." Thomas leaned back slightly, studying her face. "You've been managing their payments for quite a while, haven't you?" "Yes," she said softly. "Since my mother's surgery 2 years ago. I handle their bills, groceries, utilities, everything." He hesitated before replying. "I see. And these transfers, they mostly come from your own account?" "Yes." He turned the screen slightly toward her. Her name appeared beside a long column of outgoing payments. Just so you're aware, over the past year, more than 90% of the funds moving between these accounts originated from yours. Evelyn's throat tightened. 90%? He nodded gently. I only mention it because sometimes clients don't realize how imbalanced things become, especially with family accounts. Evelyn tried to smile, but her lips felt dry. It was supposed to be temporary, she said, just until they recovered financially. Thomas nodded slowly, his tone kind but measured. You've been managing more than you should, Ms. Clark. The words landed softly, no judgment, only recognition. For a second, she couldn't breathe. All this time, she'd kept telling herself she was helping, that her parents' comfort justified the quiet ache in her chest. But now, hearing it aloud from a stranger, it sounded different. It sounded like fact. Thomas tapped a few keys. I can restore your access if you'd like. You're listed as a secondary signatory. She hesitated. No, she said after a moment. Not yet. Are you sure? Yes, I just needed to understand what changed. He gave her a thoughtful look. If you ever need documentation, I can print a statement showing the outgoing transfers. Sometimes it helps to see it clearly. Maybe later, she said. He nodded. Of course. As she rose to leave, he added, You've done a lot for them. Don't forget that. Outside, the autumn sun had turned pale. Through the glass wall of the bank, Evelyn saw her own reflection, faint, double-layered by the glare. The blue folder clutched to her chest looked heavier now, as if the papers inside carried something more than ink and numbers. She stood still for a moment, watching people move around her, customers with envelopes, children tugging at their parents' sleeves, a courier balancing coffee trays. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to be, someone to care for. She'd always been proud of that part of herself, the one who held things together, who could be counted on. But now, looking through the bank's glass, she saw something else too. Tired eyes, a small crease forming between her brows, the trace of someone who had spent too long apologizing for her own worth. She adjusted her scarf and walked out into the crisp air. The sound of her shoes on the pavement echoed faintly against the building. At the corner, she stopped to breathe. She thought of Thomas's words again. You've been managing more than you should. It wasn't said with pity. It was said like truth, the kind that didn't need defending. Evelyn felt something steady unfurl in her chest. Not anger, not yet. Just awareness, a quiet return to herself, like the first inhale after years of shallow breathing. She looked back once at the glass doors of the bank. In the reflection, she saw the outline of a woman standing straighter than before, and for the first time in months, Evelyn didn't rush home. She walked slowly, deliberately, holding the folder close, letting the afternoon light fall across her face like something she'd forgotten she deserved. The soup on the stove had gone cold. Evelyn stood by the kitchen counter, stirring it out of habit. Outside, the evening light dimmed into a soft blue, slipping through the lace curtains. The clock on the wall read 6:42 in the evening. Somewhere in the living room, Liam hummed under his breath, sketching at the table. Her phone vibrated once, then again. The familiar ringtone, the one she never changed because she didn't want to seem distant, broke the stillness. She wiped her hands on a towel and answered. Hi, Mom. Margaret's voice came through sharp and breathless. You can't just shut us off like that. Evelyn blinked. What do you mean? The utilities bounced, her mother snapped. The car insurance too. Your father just tried the grocery card. Declined. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Evelyn said slowly. But I did stop automatic payments from my account. There was a pause, the kind that carries heat before the flame. Then her father's voice joined in, louder. You what? I stopped them, she said again, quieter now. They were coming from my account, Dad, not yours. Harold's tone turned defensive, heavy. We trusted you with our finances because you're better with numbers. You said you'd take care of it. I did, she replied. For 2 years. Every bill, every grocery run, every car repair. You're our daughter, Margaret cut in. You don't just walk away from family. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. She stared at the pot of soup, watching a small bubble rise to the surface and disappear. I'm not walking away, she said. I'm just done paying for everyone else's piece while mine falls apart. That's ungrateful, Harold said. After all we've done for you, the words landed like a bruise. Evelyn remembered Thomas Avery's calm voice at the bank. You've been managing more than you should, Ms. Clark. She took a breath. You keep saying that, Dad, but the truth is, you've been living off my salary for 2 years. I checked. 90% of those funds came from me. Margaret scoffed. You're mistaken. Your father handles... I saw the statements. Her voice didn't rise, but it steadied. Every transaction. Every month. Every transfer. All from me. Silence. Then a sharp exhale on the other end. You think money makes you better than us? Harold said. No, she said softly. I think it's time I stop pretending that giving more will make you love me differently. The line seemed to echo in the small kitchen. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Margaret's voice broke through again, thin and shaking with fury. You can't do this to us, Evelyn. You can't just decide to stop helping? I didn't shut you off, Evelyn said, forcing her voice to stay calm. I just stopped being your wallet. She heard her father inhale, then the low murmur of words she couldn't make out. The tone was sharp, accusatory. Finally, Margaret said something short. Fine. And the line went dead. Evelyn stared at the phone, the screen still glowing in the darkening room. Her hand trembled slightly as she set it down on the table. Mom? She turned. Liam stood in the doorway, holding his sketchpad against his chest. His voice was quiet, unsure. Was that Grandpa? Yes, she said. Are they mad? Evelyn sat down, pulling the phone closer, more out of habit than need. They're upset, she said. But that's all right, he frowned. Did you do something wrong? She shook her head. No, sweetheart. I just stopped doing everything right for people who never said thank you. Liam's brow furrowed in thought. Then after a pause, he nodded. Okay, he went back to his sketching. The soft sound of pencil on paper filled the silence that followed. When the house was quiet again, Evelyn opened her banking app. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the black glass of the screen. She hesitated for a moment, thumb hovering above the Shared Accounts tab. Then she pressed it. One by one, she removed permissions. The system prompted for confirmation after each. Are you sure you want to delete access? Yes, she whispered. Click, click, click. With each confirmation, something inside her loosened, the small, invisible cords she'd tied around herself for years. When it was done, she closed the app. The phone screen dimmed and went dark, a faint rectangle of light fading against the table. She sat still for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, scattering soft yellow across the window pane. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was waiting for approval, for apology, for a call that wouldn't come. She was simply there, breathing, present in the stillness she'd bought back with her own courage. The house was still except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, a mug of chamomile tea cooling beside her. The clock read 9:58 in the evening. The lamplight fell in a golden circle, warming the stacks of paper spread before her like quiet witnesses. The blue folder lay open, the one she'd labeled family expenses in her neat handwriting 2 years ago. It had started as a way to stay organized, back when her mother's surgery left her unable to work for a few months. Back when Evelyn believed she was simply helping. Now the folder felt heavier than it should. She lifted the first sheet. Electric bill, paid by Evelyn Clark. Amount $230. Then another. Grocery transfer $600. Car repair $850. Month after month, the pattern repeated. Her pen moved across a notepad, writing each line in longhand. She whispered the words under her breath as she totaled them, needing to hear the rhythm of her own giving. March, $700. April, $900. May, $1,200. The numbers kept climbing. By the time she reached the folder's end, the tea had gone cold. The total gleamed at the bottom of the page. Small and merciless. $31,600. She stared at it, feeling neither shock nor surprise. Only the slow, sinking calm that comes after too many realizations. That's 3 years of peace, she murmured, purchased with my guilt. Beside her, the lamplight flickered faintly. Shadows of the papers trembled on the table's surface. She picked up a receipt printed on fading paper. July 19th, 2024, Royal Dunes Resort, Florida. Her own card number. The date hit her like a whisper she had tried not to hear. That week, she had been on double shifts at the hospital, 12-hour nights, covering a colleague's emergency leave. She remembered her mother's message then. "We're just getting some air, dear. You work too hard." Now she understood whose air they were breathing. Her fingers tightened around the slip. The edges crinkled softly like dry leaves. For a moment, the anger felt alive, warm and breathing. Then it settled, slow and deep, into something steadier. Clarity. Evelyn gathered the receipts into neat piles, smoothing each one with care. She labeled them in quiet order: utilities, groceries, repairs, travel. She moved to the cabinet beside the refrigerator and pulled out her grandmother's old tin box, a faded silver container with small dents along the edges and a lock that stuck slightly when turned. Her grandmother had used it to keep keepsakes: a wedding ring, a few letters, a pressed rose. Now, Evelyn filled it with her own kind of memory, paper-proof, not petals. She slipped the notepad on top, the total written clearly across the final page. Then she turned the key, felt the small click, and set the box back beneath the cabinet. The sound of it closing was softer than she expected, but final. Across the room, Liam's sketch lay on the counter, a charcoal drawing of a tree beside their house. Its branches reached upward, strong and uneven. Evelyn looked at it for a long time. The boy drew from memory, from feeling. The same way she had lived, giving shape to others' stories until she forgot her own. Now she could see the outline again. She took one last look at the papers under the lamplight. The light caught the ink of her handwriting. Steady, small, unembellished. There was no drama, no shouting, no chaos. Just truth written plainly, and truth, she thought, was heavier than guilt, but far easier to carry. She stood, rinsed her empty mug, and placed it beside the sink. The water ran warm over her hands. The same lemon soap scent filled the air, the same she had used that morning, but it felt different now, cleaner somehow. The clock ticked softly. 10:47 in the evening. Evelyn turned off the lamp. The room dimmed, but the faint glow from the tin box's corner remained visible in the dark. A quiet silver reflection, almost like the memory of light. She exhaled, long and slow. Tomorrow, she would return to the bank, not for help, not for permission, just to let the truth sit somewhere beyond her kitchen table. The morning light crept over the railing, catching the steam from 2 mugs of tea. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and damp earth. Evelyn sat on the porch step, still in her cardigan from last night. The exhaustion had settled deep in her bones, not from lack of sleep, but from understanding. The blue folder, now locked away, had taken something heavy with it. But in its absence came an ache she didn't yet know how to name. The front gate clicked. Nora Benton appeared, wrapped in her floral robe and carrying a small tray. She was the kind of neighbor who always seemed to know when the world inside your house had shifted. "I made too much tea," Nora said, lifting the tray slightly. "And you look like you could use a cup." Evelyn tried to smile. "You always make too much tea." "That's the secret to never running out," Nora said, setting the tray down on the step. The porcelain cups clinked softly, delicate, white with gold trim. They matched each other, unlike the chipped teacup that sat in Evelyn's kitchen, the one her mother used every visit. They sat quietly for a while, letting the warmth of the mugs reach their fingers before their words caught up. Nora finally spoke, gently, as if the words might bruise. "You've been the parent for too long, Evelyn." It wasn't said with pity, just truth. A simple, unadorned truth that landed right where Evelyn's breath lived. Her throat tightened. She nodded, eyes fixed on the steam rising between them. The tears came without warning, not the loud, broken kind, but the quiet ones that moved slowly down her cheeks, steady and certain. Nora didn't reach over or interrupt. She just stayed, her presence filling the space where words would have been useless. Evelyn exhaled through the last of it. 31,600, she whispered, as if saying the number could empty its weight. Nora didn't ask for details. She only said, "That's a lot of love you spent." Evelyn gave a tired smile. "Too much love in the wrong direction." "Not wrong," Nora said softly. "Just unreturned." The sentence hung in the morning air, caught between the clink of teaspoons and the soft hum of sparrows. For the first time in years, Evelyn didn't feel the need to defend anyone. The tea was warm, gentle, the kind steeped slow enough to comfort. Evelyn traced the rim of her cup, noticing the gold line shimmering faintly in the light. "This is good tea," she said finally. Nora smiled. "It's better when someone else makes it." Evelyn laughed quietly, a small sound that startled her. It had been a long time since laughter felt like breathing instead of pretending. Later that afternoon, Evelyn's phone rang. "Thomas Grant," said the voice brisk and familiar, her bank manager. "Evelyn Clark?" "Just confirming. Your new solo account is active. No joint signatures, no linked transfers. And congratulations, by the way." "Congratulations?" she repeated. "You're our biggest client this quarter," he said. "The investments, the steady saving. You've built something solid. Ms. Clark, most people don't even realize what they've achieved." Evelyn smiled faintly, staring at her reflection in the dark screen after the call ended. Her hair was pulled back messily, her cardigan worn thin at the elbows, but she looked. Whole stability. It wasn't inherited. It wasn't gifted. It was hers. Evening fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that didn't ache. Evelyn stepped outside with a fresh cup of tea. Her own this time, brewed in her chipped teacup. The crack along its edge caught the last light of the sunset, glinting gold for a second. She ran her thumb over it. It wasn't perfect, but it still held warmth. The hospital hummed its steady lullaby, soft beeps, shuffling shoes, the faint hiss of the coffee machine down the hall. The fluorescent lights gave everything a pale kind of mercy. Evelyn had learned to find comfort in its predictability. In this place, pain had rules and schedules. She moved between rooms with quiet steps, her badge swinging gently with each turn. The scent of antiseptic and brewed tea mingled faintly, the air sharp but clean. Her phone buzzed in her pocket as she signed a chart. She didn't need to check the name. The tone of the vibration was enough. Margaret. She finished the note, washed her hands, and only then slipped the phone out. "After all we sacrificed for you," the message read, "you'd let your parents go hungry?" There was no greeting, no warmth, just the familiar choreography of guilt dressed as concern. Evelyn stared at the words for a moment, not long enough for them to burrow, but long enough to feel the faint, dull ache of recognition. She locked the screen without replying. It was strange, how silence had become her boundary. "A gentle, invisible wall, Miss Clark?" Evelyn turned. Mrs. Landers, 83, with thinning silver hair and a soft voice, smiled from her bed. Her eyes held that searching kindness of people who've known both pain and patience. "You were humming again," the old woman said. Evelyn blinked. "Was I?" "Yes, dear. That little tune you always do. It makes the hallway sound less lonely." Evelyn smiled, tucking the blanket around her. "Then I'll make sure to keep humming." "You remind me of my daughter," Mrs. Landers murmured, half dreaming now. "She always tried to do too much for everyone." Evelyn paused, brushing a stray hair from the woman's pillow. "And did she ever stop?" "She learned," came the faint reply. "When she realized love doesn't mean carrying everyone else's weight." Evelyn stood there for a while after Mrs. Landers drifted to sleep, the rhythmic ticking of the hallway clock marking the seconds. Each tick felt softer than the last. Not urgent, just steady. Her shift ended just before midnight. The clock above the exit doors read 11:58, the red digits pulsing faintly. Evelyn clocked out, folded her coat over her arm, and stepped into the cool night air. The streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't need to be filled. Her phone buzzed once more. Another message. She didn't open it. The glow of the screen reflected briefly on her face, then vanished into her pocket. Instead, she listened to the soft, living sounds around her. A car in the distance, a nurse laughing near the parking lot, the whisper of wind through the maple trees, not echoes of blame, just life, moving forward. At home, Evelyn hung her coat by the door and set her phone face down on the counter. The ticking from the kitchen clock filled the silence, not harsh, not demanding tick, tick, tick. Each sound was an anchor, a small reminder. She was still here, still steady. She poured herself a cup of tea, this time without thought. The chipped cup caught the dim light again, its crack softened by the steam. For years, she had lived like that cup, functional, fragile, always hiding the line where she'd been hurt. Now, she simply saw it as proof she'd survived being dropped. Outside, the night deepened. Evelyn sat by the window, sipping slowly, watching her reflection fade into the glass as the city lights blinked beyond. Her parents' messages would still be there in the morning, lined up like ghosts trying to find a door that no longer opened. But Evelyn had stopped leaving the door unlocked. She had work to do tomorrow. Real work. Healing that gave back instead of draining her. For the first time in years, she felt her heartbeat slow to match the ticking clock. Not anxious, not guilty, just present. The air carried that early autumn crispness, the kind that smelled faintly of damp earth and cooling leaves. A soft wind moved through the maple tree, scattering a few golden leaves across the lawn like small, quiet blessings. Evelyn stood at the edge of the yard, rake in hand. The motion was simple, rhythmic, the whisper of leaves brushing against each other, the creak of the rake handle, the hush of her own breathing. It was just past 8:22 in the morning. The sun was still low, silver against the clouds. From the porch, Liam sat cross-legged, sketchbook open on his knees. A small pencil rested between his fingers as he looked out toward her. Every few minutes he'd glance up, then down again, capturing the light, the shape of her, maybe the gate behind her. He had his father's calm, that quiet, observing kind of patience. "Need help?" he called softly. Evelyn smiled, leaning on the rake. "No, sweetheart. I've got it." She turned back toward the old wooden gate. Its hinge had been squeaking for months, always swinging open when the wind picked up. Harold had promised to fix it a year ago, one of those next-time promises that never came. For a long while, she'd told herself it wasn't worth bothering about. But this morning felt different. She fetched the small toolbox from the porch. The metal clasp clicked open, revealing the modest collection she'd slowly built, tools she'd bought with her own paychecks. Her hands were steady as she knelt by the gate, examining the rusted screws. Each turn of the screwdriver felt like something loosening inside her chest. "Every hinge I fix feels like one less chain to them." The thought arrived quietly, not as bitterness but as clarity. She had lived too long waiting for others to maintain her peace. Now it felt enough to keep the gate upright, the garden trimmed, her son smiling. "Is it staying shut now?" Liam asked, watching her tug the gate closed. Evelyn pressed the latch down. It clicked neatly into place, firm, final. "It'll stay," she said. He nodded, shading something into his drawing. "You look different, Mom." She tilted her head. "Different how?" He shrugged with a small grin. "Lighter, I guess." Evelyn laughed, brushing her palms on her jeans. "Maybe I am." She walked over and peered at his sketch. The page showed her standing beneath the maple, rake in hand, surrounded by soft strokes of gold and brown. The gate behind her was drawn perfectly straight. "It's beautiful," she murmured. He smiled. I wanted to draw you how you look when you're not worried." Her throat tightened just slightly, not with sadness, but with something like gratitude. The kettle whistled faintly from inside the house. She went in to pour them tea, 2 chipped cups side by side on the counter. One was hers, one Liam's, the same pattern her parents had given her years ago as a housewarming gift. She traced the tiny crack along the rim with her thumb, remembering the day she almost threw it away. Instead, she had learned to pour more gently. Now, even with its flaw, it held the warmth just fine. They sat together on the porch, sipping quietly. The repaired gate stood at the end of the walkway, swaying slightly in the wind but never opening. Across the street, Mrs. Benton waved from her garden. Evelyn raised her cup in reply, and Nora smiled knowingly before tending back to her flowers. The sun climbed higher, the air filled with the soft rustle of leaves and distant birds. Evelyn leaned back, eyes half closed, feeling the calm stretch between each sound. No phone calls. No transfers. No apologies rehearsed. Just the sound of a gate that stayed shut when she wanted it to. She looked out at the yard. Not perfect, not large, but entirely hers. The work she did here was her own kind of healing. Slow, steady, honest. And for the first time, she didn't wonder if her parents would ever understand. Some gates, she thought, were never meant to open again. That evening, as the sun dropped low, Evelyn stepped outside one last time to bring in the rake. The air smelled faintly of smoke and pine from a neighbor's chimney. She touched the gate once more, pressing it closed until it latched. The small click echoed gently through the quiet street. It sounded, to her, like peace. The house was still, the kind of silence that hums softly after a long day. The clock above the sink read 9:43 in the evening. Evelyn stood by the counter, sleeves rolled up, warm water running over her hands. The chipped teacup rested in the sink, its familiar crack catching the kitchen light like a thin silver thread. She washed it gently, as though it were something living. The lemon scent of dish soap lingered in the air. The kettle, now cooling on the stove, gave a soft metallic sigh. It had been almost 3 months since the call from the bank, since the gate was fixed, since the last message from Margaret had gone unanswered. The distance between then and now felt less like time and more like air, finally breathable. She rinsed the cup, set it on the towel to dry, and sat at the kitchen table. The surface was clean except for a single open notebook and a smooth black pen. For a long moment, she just listened to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking clock, the wind brushing past the window. Then she began to write. October 12th, 2025. It cost me $30,600 to learn what love should never invoice. She paused, letting the words sink in. The ink shone wet in the lamplight. I spent years thinking loyalty meant proof of payment, that care could be transferred, recorded, balanced. But real love doesn't need a ledger. It lives in the small things that never ask to be tallied. She drew a slow breath and continued. I thought I was paying for their comfort. But what I was really buying was silence, their approval, their permission to rest. And when I stopped, they stopped calling. The pen hovered. That silence felt like loss, but it became my peace. She underlined the last word softly. Twice, the kettle began to whistle again, low and steady, almost like it was remembering its cue. Evelyn stood, turned off the flame, and poured a little water into her cup. The crack glistened faintly as the steam rose. She held it in both hands, feeling the warmth spread into her palms. Once, she had tried to hide that crack, turned it away from guests, kept it at the back of the cupboard. Now it sat at the front, the cup she reached for first. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. She took a sip, the faint taste of lemon and warmth settling deep. Outside, a breeze nudged the repaired gate. It creaked softly, then stayed closed. Evelyn smiled. The kettle cooled to silence, and the house, at last, felt entirely hers.